the canoe a sheer and get nearer to the shore? These waterfalls have generally rapids above them, and one might as well get into the maelstrom at once as to run into their suction." "Trust to us, friend Cap," answered Pathfinder. "We are but freshwater sailors, it is true, and I cannot boast of being much even of that; but we understand rifts and rapids and cataracts, and in going down these we shall do our endeavors not to disgrace our education." "In going down!" exclaimed Cap. "The devil, man! You do not dream of going down a waterfall in this eggshell of bark." "Sartain, the path lies over the falls, and it is much easier to shoot them than to unload the canoe and to carry that and all it contains around a portage of a mile by hand." Mabel turned her pallid countenance toward the young man in the stern of the canoe, for just at that moment a fresh roar of the fall was borne to her ears by a new current of the air, and it really sounded terrific, now that the cause was understood. "We thought that, by landing the females and the 2 Indians," Jasper quietly observed, "we 3 white men, all of whom are used to the water, might carry the canoe over in safety, for we often shoot these falls." "And we counted on you, friend mariner, as a mainstay," said Pathfinder, winking to Jasper over his shoulder; "for you are accustomed to see waves tumbling about, and without some one to steady the cargo, all the finery of the Sergeant's daughter might be washed into the river and be lost." Cap was puzzled. The idea of going over a waterfall was, perhaps, more serious in his eyes than it would have been in those of one totally ignorant of all that pertained to boats, for he understood the power of the element, and the total feebleness of man when exposed to its fury. Still his pride revolted at the thought of deserting the boat, while others not only steadily but coolly proposed to continue in it. Notwithstanding the latter feeling, and his innate as well as acquired steadiness in danger, he would probably have deserted his post, had not the images of Indians tearing scalps from the human head taken so strong a hold of his fancy as to induce him to imagine the canoe a sort of sanctuary. "What is to be done with Magnet?" he demanded, affection for his niece raising another qualm in his conscience. "We cannot allow Magnet to land if there are enemy Indians near." "Nay, no Mingo will be near the portage, for that is a spot too public for their deviltries," answered the Pathfinder confidently. "Nature is nature, and it is an Indian's nature to be found where he is least expected. No fear of him on a beaten path, for he wishes to come upon you when unprepared to meet him, and the fiery villains make it a point to deceive you one way or another. Sheer in, Eau douce, and we will land the Sergeant's daughter on the end of that log, where she can reach the shore with a dry foot." The injunction was obeyed, and in a few minutes the whole party had left the canoe, with the exception of Pathfinder and the 2 sailors. Notwithstanding his professional pride, Cap would have gladly followed, but he did not like to exhibit so unequivocal a weakness in the presence of a freshwater sailor. "I call all hands to witness," said he, as those who had landed moved away, "that I do not look on this affair as anything more than canoeing in the woods. There is no seamanship in tumbling over a waterfall, which is a feat the greatest lubber can perform as well as the oldest mariner." "Nay, nay, you needn't despise the Oswego Falls, neither," put in Pathfinder; "for, though they may not be Niagara, nor the Genesee, nor the Cahoos, nor Glens, nor those on the Canada, they are narvous enough for a new beginner. Let the Sergeant's daughter stand on yonder rock, and she will see the manner in which we ignorant backwoodsmen get over a difficulty that we can't get under. Now, Eau douce, a steady hand and a true eye, for all rests on you, seeing that we can count Master Cap for no more than a passenger." The canoe was leaving the shore as he concluded, while Mabel went hurriedly and trembling to the rock that had been pointed out, talking to her companion of the danger her uncle so unnecessarily ran, while her eyes were riveted on the agile and vigorous form of Eau douce, as he stood erect in the stern of the light boat, governing its movements. As soon, however, as she reached a point where she got a view of the fall, she gave an involuntary but suppressed scream and covered her eyes. At the next instant The latter were again free, and the entranced girl stood immovable as a statue, a scarcely breathing observer of all that passed. The two Indians seated themselves passively on a log, hardly looking towards the stream, while the wife of Arrowhead came near Mabel, and appeared to watch the motions of the canoe with some such interest as a child regards the leaps of a tumbler. As soon as the boat was in the stream, Pathfinder sank on his knees, continuing to use the paddle, though it was slowly, and in a manner not to interfere with the efforts of his companion. The latter still stood erect, and as he kept his eye on some object beyond the fall, it was evident that he was carefully looking for the spot proper for their passage. "Farther west, boy, farther west," muttered Pathfinder. "There where you see the water foam. Bring the top of the dead oak in a line with the stern of the blasted hemlock." Eau douce made no answer, for the canoe was in the centre of the stream, with its head pointed towards the fall, and it had already begun to quicken its motion by the increased force of the current. At that moment Cap would cheerfully have renounced every claim to glory that could possibly be acquired by the feat to have been safe again on shore. He heard the roar of the water, thundering, as it might be, behind a screen, but becoming more and more distinct, louder and louder, and before him he saw its line cutting the forest below, along which the green and angry element seemed stretched and shining, as if the particles were about to lose their principle of cohesion. "Down with your helm, man!" he exclaimed, unable any longer to suppress his anxiety, as the canoe glided towards the edge of the fall. "Ay, down it is, sure enough," answered Pathfinder, looking behind him for a single instant, with his silent, joyous laugh. "Down we go, of a sartainty. Heave her starn up, boy, farther up with her starn." The rest was like the passage of the viewless wind. Eau douce gave the required sweep with his paddle. The canoe glanced into the channel, and for a few seconds it seemed to Cap that he was tossing in a cauldron. He felt the bow of the canoe tip, saw the raging, foaming water careering madly by his side, was sensible that the light fabric in which he floated was tossed about like an egg-shell, and then, not less to his great joy than to his surprise, he discovered that it was gliding across the basin of still water below the fall, under the steady impulse of Jasper's paddle. The Pathfinder continued to laugh, but he arose from his knees, and searching for a tin pot and a horn spoon, he began deliberately to measure the water that had been taken in the passage. 14 spoonfuls, Eau douce, 14 fairly measured spoonfuls. I have, you must acknowledge, known you to go down with only 10. Master Cap leaned so hard upstream, returned Jasper seriously, that I had difficulty in trimming the canoe. It may be so, no doubt it was so, since you say it, but I have known you to go over with only 10. Cap now gave a tremendous hem, felt for his cue as if to ascertain its safety, and then looked back in order to examine the danger he had gone through. His safety is easily explained. Most of the river fell perpendicularly 10 or 12 feet, but near its center the force of the current had so far worn away the rock as to permit the water to shoot through a narrow passage, at an angle of about 40 or 45 degrees. Down this ticklish descent the canoe had glanced, amid fragments of broken rock, whirlpools, foam, and furious tossings of the element, which an uninstructed eye would have believed menaced inevitable destruction to an object so fragile. But the very lightness of the canoe had favored its descent, for, borne on the crest of the waves, and directed by a steady eye and an arm full of muscle, it had passed like a feather from one pile of foam to another, scarcely permitting its glossy side to be wetted. There were a few rocks to be avoided, the proper direction was to be rigidly observed, and the fierce current did the rest. Lest the reader suppose we are dealing purely in fiction, the writer will add that he has known a long 32-pounder carried over these same falls in perfect safety. To say that Cap was astonished would not be expressing half his feelings. He felt awed, for the profound dread of rocks which most seamen entertain came in aid of his admiration of the boldness of the exploit. Still he was indisposed to express all he felt,